Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. So, Thomas, you were right.
I love it to hear that. I just love that, Betsy.
Yes, I know you love to hear when you're right. But what it is I looked at all these headlines with Michael Flynn last night, and it was like, oh my gosh, the world is coming to an end. And how the reporters from so many different platforms were reporting this, it just felt like Trump was doomed. But of course, you were over there just laughing and pointed out that I could check any of the YouTubes that you have recently done on Manafort and Flynn and find out that you predicted this. You showed the way quite a while ago. So tell us what is going on, and please, by all means, point out where you were right.
Well, Mueller's cover-up here is so profound. We're going to talk about the lies of Mueller's cover-up. And yes, I was correct, and yes, the other conclave members were incorrect. And what I had gloated about many times, as you have pointed out in these previous videos that we've done, is that I said that Manafort would go down as well as other low-hanging fruit. But I also said, I don't know that Manafort will actually go down. He will be charged. He will be indicted. So let's just look at what the news says. The news says, by implication, that yes, Comey has been exonerated. Robert Mueller, the honest, the highest integrity lawyer and law enforcement person in America, has done a complete and thorough investigation of all connection to Russian collusion to the Trump team, or Russian meddling in the election, or anything that might come out of that. That is a complete joke. Now, let me just give you some of the blunt things. First off, there has nothing been done wrong. Even Flynn, what Flynn did wasn't wrong. They simply took the unmasked NSA phone conversations that he had with Keselek, the Russian ambassador, and they used his words and said, did you say the words? And I'm predicting right now another thing, mark my words, when we see the transcripts, which we never will because they're supposed to be secret, even though they've been released, which then would abnegate the entire investigation because of all the leaks, but we're not going to go into that.
Well, Thomas, I think you're, I hear your role, but you got to get to the point so that we can know how we're going forward in the YouTube. What exactly happened?
What happened was nothing.
Okay, nothing
so far,
happened,
absolutely nothing.
But all the media with these blaring headlines say that some gross error was done, and this is all going to come back on Trump.
By insinuation, they're trying to say, because it was a Russian who they wanted to pick out of the numerous telephone calls that he had to other nations, because this was after the election. This was president-elect. As you saw in numerous places, there had to be retractions calling him candidate Trump, because if the candidate Trump had told Flynn to call and to say the things that he directly told him to do 3 times. And that's the reason that Trump knew that Flynn had caught himself up in his own lie. We had said earlier that Flynn is a loose cannon and that Flynn had to go. And the point blank bluntness of it is 2 days after the FBI told Donald Trump that they were investigating Flynn and that they had him on tape saying that he would consider lifting sanctions with the Russians before Donald Trump became president, when he was president-elect, that this supposedly was a crime. This wouldn't have been a crime if he had said, hey, Michael Flynn, assure you we will get the sanctions lifted. That doesn't mean the president said that. That isn't what the president told him to talk about. Everyone knows what the president told him to talk about because it was in the news. Michael Flynn said when he was asked about this by the 2 FBI agents, he said, well, I didn't remember if I said anything about lifting sanctions. This is all in the news. This was all completely honest. They all cooperated with Robert Mueller. None of them should have cooperated with Robert Mueller. The 2 people who've been charged, George Papadopoulos for lying and Flynn for lying, is because they had in Papadopoulos' case, they had his own sworn statement, and they used that against him, and they tripped him up, and he tried to make light in his repeat of what was in his statement, and they called that a lie, and then he had to admit to it. Why? Otherwise, just like Flynn, they take you down. Flynn had to mortgage his house. He's being driven into bankruptcy. His company is at an end. They went after his son. This is what they do in a grand jury indictment, behind closed doors, in secret, with impaneled idiots who are their buddies. They look at secret information and secret star witnesses that you, as a person that they're going after, never even get to question. And that's what happens in these. And if you lie to them, then they do this deal with you so that they say, we're going to not really prosecute you. You get 0 to 5 years for lying to us. But, if you cooperate for the whole rest of the investigation, then, we're going to just say you lied. Why? There was nothing technically Michael Flynn did, but there actually was. And we had stated what Michael Flynn had done. The second this came out, we stated this, and we also stated what Robert Mueller would do in his investigation, because it's nothing more than a cover-up for Comey, to cover up for Uranium One, to cover up for the Awan Pakistani brothers hacking and stealing things from the DCC, from 80 members of Congress, from Podesta's own emails, from the DNC. These are all known facts. The Awans, did Mueller look into this? No. Did Mueller look into Russian One? That perhaps it was Clinton that was being manipulated by the Russians? No.
Well, one of the things that we talked about last night is perhaps the people out here that you're all listening and you're sharing it with everyone about what the real truth is about Bob Mueller is catching up with and getting a little too close, and maybe he just needs to close everything up and go away so Uranium One is not investigated.
If Bob had listened to me, good old Bobby Muleface had listened to me, he would have ended the investigation long before now. But what he had to do, because he couldn't find anything, is call in the lawyers who had been involved since 2004 to try to catch Paul Manafort in some crime.
Which is just going to turn out to be some income tax issue.
I predicted exactly what it would be. The money that he got from the European Council on a Moderate Ukraine, he and Tony Podesta and Rick Gates, 3 companies, Podesta Group, Davis Manafort, and Mercury LLC. I told all of this before it was in the news. I knew all of this because all you have to do is watch and listen. When Paul Manafort, had been the lobbyist to help Yanukovych come to power the first time, which no one wants to talk about, when he became the president of Ukraine, and then later he was ousted by a George Soros CIA-inspired Orange Revolution. And folks, that's what's happening here in America, by the way. Point 6 of the 7 stages of Soros is to contest an election, and that's what we're talking about. That's what Mueller was covering up. Even after all the October surprises of Comey, we had the actual direct attempt for a coup led by Obama himself. And we can demonstrate that from December on. That's when Obama put the sanctions on Russia, which made it so difficult for now us to have any relationship with Russia, because anything Trump does with Russia, he's considered to be a Russian spy, a Soviet communist, which is complete insanity.
But Russia is not our enemy. So why in the world all this hoo-ha about Russia, the enemy?
That's the whole point. It's because it was the opposite of what they said. Who was in bed with Putin? In 2010, Obama and Hillary Clinton gave $400 million to Putin to build a plutonium downblending facility as part of the Nuclear Security Summit, which was part of the agreement that they made at that time called the Restart. It was a new treaty. It's a nuclear treaty, and in that treaty, we not only allowed Russia to continue to control our entire uranium in this country, both the enriching and downblending, and all the use of uranium in this country is now in the hands of Russia. It has been for 20 years since Bill Clinton sold us out, and before that, the plan was created by George Herbert Walker Bush, Daddy Bush, and then Clinton in 1984 had a 20-year agreement. And when that agreement started coming to an end, he got involved again with Frank Juster. How come Mueller didn't look? They looked at, this is absolutely astounding. What is it? The APCO company, which was a lobbyist company. The Congress is saying that Hillary Clinton said that she only received $75,000 from APCO when it was $1 million. That's what they're looking into? How about the $152 million that was paid to her by members of Rosatom, by the previous ARMS uranium, by Uranium One? And this is the one that just floors me. Did Robert Mueller look into Bill Clinton's deal to get Uranium One, that Kazakhstani first uranium mine that his buddy Frank Justra started Uranium One with? That was a deal by Bill Clinton to get his buddy into uranium, the guy who owns the third largest gold manufacturing, and I use manufacturing quite literally, gold. He's in Canada, one of the billionaires up there. He donated $100 million to the Clinton-Justra Sustainability Growth Initiative after he got the deal with Uranium One where he sold Uranium One to ARMS, and then the government approved it through Hillary Clinton and Obama, and then he sold all of ARMS and Uranium One to Rosatom, which is directly controlled by Vladimir Putin himself, who works out of Kazakhstan, which is where all these deals went down. Then Carlos Slim gave $100 million to that same fund. So Bill Clinton...
Carlos Slim, remember, of the New York Times.
$200 million was given to Clinton for getting that Uranium One deal, as well as half of the money that Frank Justra makes for the rest of his life from his gold mining. And that, as I mentioned, supposedly that's the third or fourth largest gold mining in the world. So that means Clinton is going to receive probably billions of dollars from that deal. Did Robert Mueller look into that? No. Did they look into the Russian criminal oligarchic mafia control of uranium in this country that was basically out of control and covered up by Mueller himself, Rod Rosenstein, James Comey, the very people? Did they look into that Russian collusion? No. Did they look into John Podesta's Russian collusion with 75,000 shares in Juul Energy? No. Did they look into the 35 million given to Juul directly from the Kremlin? No. Did they look into Tony Podesta's lobbying for the Russians and the Ukrainians and the largest Russian banks, as well as other Russian interests? I forget, 117 times he came into the Podesta-controlled White House as a lobbyist for foreign agents without ever registering as a foreign agent. So here's the deal. They got Manafort and Rick Gates for not lobbying as a foreign agent. But they did not prosecute Tony Podesta for that and allowed him to register after the fact. They said they were going to charge Flynn with that, but they were going to drop that charge if Flynn admitted to lying to them with the one word lifting. That's what I'm predicting it is, one word. And so they were going to drop those charges that he didn't register as a foreign agent. I said from the beginning, Flynn is guilty. So is Manafort. But Trump needed to use these people. They had the leverage. Manafort got Trump through the Electoral College without unscathed, with everybody voting what they were supposed to instead of all what they had told the press they were going to, which is resist Trump. He got him elected. Manafort single-handedly obliterated the Electoral College resistance, which is, again, a coup. That is a regime change. That is a resistance to our own laws. This is a duly elected president, and yet right from the moment he was elected, the attempt to get him out of office and impeach him before he was even elected by January 20th by using Flynn's...
Not elected, inaugurated.
Excuse me, inaugurated. By using Flynn's flimsy conversations. Everyone knows Flynn was a loose cannon. Always said things he had to retract. That's the reason when he busted Obama and said, hey, we're paying ISIS in Syria. What are you talking about? We are ISIS. They kicked him out.
Honey, don't yell into the microphone.
And he resigned. But he was still a military officer, and then he went to work for Erdogan. And not only did he try to appease what was going on in Syria and do the right thing, and he was paid for that along with his son, he also tried to get one of the biggest criminals in America being protected by the CIA, NSA, FBI, in other words, Comey, Rodstein, John Brennan, the very people involved in the Russian dossier. Oh, hey, did Mueller investigate the Russian dossier? Did he get the GPS bank records? No, the Congress is doing that. He ignored all of that. He ignored everything except to get him, his buddy, Comey, and everybody else off, gather all the info that would sink them, Rosenstein, McCabe, all of them, gather it all together, take it because they use it for blackmail. They don't destroy it. We know that because all those BlackBerries, as well as the computers they said they destroyed, were found after Comey was fired when he wasn't in his office. What a coincidence. Anyway, and by the way, Mueller and Comey have been talking about the whole thing, which completely negates the investigation because it's supposed to be secret. Because we know this because of Comey's stupid text messages that he's sending out, his tweets that he's sending out. He knows what's happening in the case before it happens. It's all constructed ahead of time. That's the reason I could predict that. I know evil. I had studied the evil of Comey. It led me back to Allen Dulles, which led me back to Edwin Pauley, which led me back to Charles Dawes, and I saw how this happened in history. We wrote about this. We talked about this. We pointed out that when Comey committed perjury 3 times in front of the Congress, and then at least 4 times in the public, said the opposite of even his perjury in the in his congressional testimony.
Wait a minute. So Flynn can lie to the FBI and get all in trouble, but Comey and many more can lie to Congress and to the American people, and nobody cares.
No one even noticed, except it seemed to be us.
Well, now, of course, what I see out there in the internet world and through comments and YouTubes and whatever, people are awake. And I don't think Mueller and gang understand how much the American people know about him, Comey, and their cabal.
We're calling them out of the darkness, and in the light, these trolls turn to stone. So, Clapper lied during all of this. John Brennan lied.
Liars.
Admiral Rogers lied. They all came before Congress and lied, and then they went on the news, and they've been on the news since, telling other lies to counter the lies that they told, so no one would know which was the lie and which was the truth. But we had predicted from the beginning that that was Comey's method out. He perjured himself, and then, remember, 3 days later he came back and said, I misspoke. Or another time he wrote a letter saying, no, let me clarify what I meant. In other words, let me cover for myself. He lied, and he lied because we figured that he was going to take a plea bargain for perjury, when in fact it was completely covering for the Clintons, not only with the tarmac meetings, not only with the emails, not only with the security violations with the server in her house, but also the DNC server and the lies about that, and that the FBI never ever saw that server, and there was no Russian hacking. They don't know. It was a Russian who told them it was a hacking. Dmitry Alperovitch, he was a spy. He had been arrested by the FBI. We were going to believe a criminal, and then we get Clapper and all these intelligence heads coming out and lying. We know that Trump set up a sting on them to prove that one of those 4 heads, Comey, Clapper, Rogers, and Brennan, they were the only ones who know what was said. Within 45 minutes, it was leaked to the press, and it wasn't Trump. None of his people were there. His people didn't even know he had that meeting. That was the one meeting he allowed of the combined 17 agencies, which is controlled by James Clapper, which was a lie. And then he allowed Comey to come, and Comey, who was afraid to meet with him, met with him in person and gave him a 1-page summary of the 36-page Russian fake dossier. In other words, they didn't even give him any intelligence. Remember, there was an investigation into Russian meddling after Trump was elected. This was an attempt at a coup. Remember, Clapper went into great detail, and so did Comey. This intelligence report cannot be incorrect because... And they named huge amounts of people, huge amounts of money that were spent on this investigation. Look into the investigation. It was a recycled investigation they had done over a 5-year study when they were creating the Paradox of Progress to see what effect Russia Today, RT, and Sputnik news agencies had upon the American people. They used that. That was the only evidence they had. There was no investigation. Then there was a counterintelligence investigation, because we know that because Brennan admitted it finally before the Congress, and so did Comey. Brennan said, intelligence came to us in July, and it was so significant, I had to pass it on to the FBI. Wait, it was from a foreign agent. He can't pass it on to the FBI. It was his job. The dossier was created by by British agent Christopher Steele, which makes it illegal meddling in the election. Now we know it was paid for by Podesta. Podesta lied before Congress. Mark Elias lied before Congress. What's happening to them? How come their house, like Manafort, to get out of house arrest, had to put all 4 of his properties up, which I pointed out, those 4 properties, they'd been going after him
For an income tax problem?
Yes.
So you see, they're just thugs. They're all
They're
caught
thugs.
in their lies. It's a Gordian knot of lies and deceits in this swamp, and there's no way out for them. They only have their own evil friends and colleagues to help them perpetuate this lie on the American people.
And as we pointed out, it's a war not only between the intelligence agencies, between the military and the corporate branches of them, and too many intelligence agencies. Cut it down, President Trump. Cut it down, just as Flynn had planned to do. That's why Flynn had to go. Flynn could have carried him through the coup. They had to get rid of Flynn. They came and they said the FBI had done an entrapment on Flynn because they had been investigating him for quite some time. Actually, since he left the Obama administration, they'd had supposed FISA warrants on him. And because he had been talking with foreign people, Erdogan in Turkey, and he went to Russia and was paid $33,000 because he'd go on RT sometimes. He'd go on Russia Today. And he got paid for that. So does everybody. They're not our enemy. When we just made them an enemy and said they had to file as a foreign agent, Russia says all 8 of our propaganda news agencies, which are much bigger in Russia, now have to all leave the country. Just like when Obama put sanctions on late in December on Russia for meddling in the election, which there was no Russian meddling in the election. They were supporting Hillary.
There was no Russian meddling in the election.
Period. There were some Russians like a Russian who worked for Facebook who wrote Hillary Clinton's template for winning, which was supported by $1.5 billion.
But that's not state sponsored.
No, this was Obama sponsored.
Yes, right.
Obama sponsored.
Obama is the one who rigged the election along with Schmidt and Zuckerberg.
You call them thugs. Valerie Jarrett was the chief
Susan Rice
of staff for Mayor Daley. You don't get any more mafia, thug, mob connected leveraging. Guess who worked for her? Michelle Obama. Guess who Michelle Obama brought into the office? Barack Obama. And that is the most corrupt political organization in America.
So
it moved to Washington, D.C.
So the Chicago mob was running the White House.
And through the United States Digital Service, they meddled in the election with Google offering up all of its top young tech guys to basically create a war room that fought directly against Trump through unmasking of Flynn, and Manafort. Why? On Manafort, they had a 5-year-long investigation, which they had actually closed and had started in 2004. But then they couldn't get him. Why? Manafort's the slipperiest guy in Washington, D.C. He did the corrupt political financial campaign management for 3 presidents. He put 3 presidents in the White House. He got Trump through the Electoral College. He was only there as the head of his campaign for 2 months to get into the Electoral College. He worked with Trump for 4 months. 2 days after Trump was told that they had a sting that had been going on with Flynn and with Manafort, with both of them, Trump fired them. 2 days after he was told. Here's the point. Why didn't they tell Trump that they were doing these investigations with these people he was connected to? That's called a sting.
They were working on
their own coup. That is called entrapment. That is classic FBI using CIA, covert, counterintelligence, manipulation of the law, letting one guy get away for doing the same crime and prosecuting another. That's what's happening with Manafort. They're going to prosecute him for not filing as a foreign agent, and same for Rick Davis. They're not doing it for Podesta. John Podesta, who claims he hasn't worked with the Podesta brothers for 15 years, lie that he never divested himself. He's going to have to show those papers before I believe that. I mean, he came out recently, said, all these accusations about him are lies, and then he just cried, practically, and then he called it all BS, and he got mad and yelled at people. That's what you do when you're guilty. That's why Hillary Clinton is doing what she's doing. They have to fight. They had to get Mueller in there. Comey had to lie so that he would be fired. He lied 3 times in front of the president. He then accused the president repeatedly that he had an investigation, a possible criminal investigation going against the candidate Trump. Now, we know that he used Franklin Farrar and the Trump Tower Russian connection. Why didn't that come out in the Mueller investigation? We know that Comey used Felix Sater to set up Jared Kushner and Donald Jr. and Ivanka in a number of stings. One with a Russian lawyer, the very famous one at Trump Towers. Twice he sent Felix Sater with Ivanka and Jared, once to the Crimea and once to Moscow, and walked them around, and Felix Sater said, I'm going to build the Trump Towers here for you. Lie. They actually put $1 million into the Crimean thing, didn't go anywhere, because Felix Sater is a agent of the FBI. He was convicted a long time ago and has been used by Comey as his agent. This has been going on for a long time when they realized that Donald Trump was a possible candidate all the way back in 2000 when Roger Stone identified him and tried to get him to run for office. So they've had a file on Trump. Remember, the second that Comey realized that Trump was serious, he did an FBI investigation on Trump and his father, and white hats in the FBI brought their site online, which hadn't been online for about a year, just to print the fact that the FBI investigation said Trump was completely clean. Then it was the dossier, which we know was paid for by Podesta, well, the DNC, and Hillary. Now, what they haven't named is who in Hillary, and I have already named that. I named that long before any of this happened. I said Hillary's super PAC, I think it's called Victory for Hillary or something, which also gave the money for Jill McCabe to run in her office for, I believe it was Senator Virginia. And remember that it was Terry McAuliffe who gave another $250,000, and he's crooked. He's on the Clinton Foundation also. He's going to run for president. All these crazy people think they're going to run for president. Comey has insinuated he may run for president. The crookedest lawyer, the crookedest law enforcement agent in American history, current history, along with Mueller, his teacher, and I predicted that Comey would turn to Mueller before he did. I didn't know he would use perjury and then get fired on purpose. He got fired on purpose because he was when Trump won, they had to go into hyper mode, and they had to go into, we can't let him be ever inaugurated. And then the crimes that happened from that point on were, just before that, the crimes were amazing. With Homeland Security became in charge of the election because of 21 phishing viruses sent to private computers of people who worked in polling places in their home. It wasn't even at the poll.
No, that was just Jad Johnson trying to get into the election rigging game.
That was 21 excuses for Barack Obama to take control of counting all of the votes through his office.
We need to go back to
the
paper
U.S. Digital
ballots
Service in the White House.
We need to go back to paper ballots, and
Absolutely.
I'm all about getting that purple ink on my thumb. Let's do it the old-fashioned way.
Presidential elections are worth trillions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Okay, Trump right now, the Climate Accord, that's $5 trillion we didn't have to spend. He went around the $5 trillion plus in the stock market. Another $1 trillion he sold in to countries just traveling around. So we got the $11 trillion man in 1 year. That's what a president can do. With Obama, it was 7 countries we bombed, 5 million refugees, 2 million dead, 7 wars in our hand. And what did Trump do? He came in, he stopped the $1 billion being given to ISIS, and the Syrian war is essentially over. What happens? Israel then threatens to attack Lebanon. They're not going to let it stop. The Zionists, through Israel, is not going to let this stop. What is Trump doing? He's stopping all of it. He's just saying rule of law, rule of law, rule of law. And that is absolutely turning the smoke and mirrors into ash. And they what I laugh about, and I say this for hope, do not get discouraged that I didn't use a crystal ball. I didn't use a psychic. I didn't use tarot cards. I didn't use astrology. I used sheer logic to point out the normal pathways of evil. I predicted what Comey would do to the T. I predicted what would happen with Mueller to the T, to the exact T. The only thing I did not predict is they'd go after the lowest hanging fruit, George Papadopoulos, because he thought he was having sex with Vladimir Putin's relative, and he was going to get Trump's attention. Hey, I have a Russian connection. Hey, I have a Russian connection. The silliest thing I've ever heard. We spent millions and millions of dollars to get Robert Mueller to cause George Papadopoulos to cry. Remember, Manafort and Rick Gates may not be ever convicted. I said this from the beginning. They will be indicted. They may not be convicted. He's as slippery as anybody. This is tax evasion through a hedge fund, and it's not even their money, and he was paid that money legally. They tried to take down Manafort with the fake Ukrainian lie. There was a $27 million theft that went into offshore accounts. That was to set you all up to believe that Manafort is an evil liar, manipulator, because he worked with Trump. Lie. And what have they really got? Nothing. What did they got with Flynn? They got him on one word. What did they get with Papadopoulos? He didn't want to admit in public that he had sex with that girl who tricked him. So.
Okay, final question. What's going to happen to Mueller's investigation? Is he going to be wrapping it up now?
I want to believe, and it would be along our prediction.
Well, don't tell me what you think I want to know. I want you to tell me what you think is going to happen, like you have told us with all these other players, so we know what to watch for.
The investigation should close down immediately.
I know it should, but what do you think is going to happen?
That's what I predict.
Okay.
I predict the investigation. They may try to get Katie McFarland. They may try to get a couple other people on lying because all those people were stupid. They cooperated, but also in a grand jury indictment, if you don't cooperate, you lose anyway. Because they already have the evidence they're going to hear from one side. You don't get to question that person, and they've already made up their mind before you walk in the room. That's the way this works. That's the reason I was able to predict this. All the leaks make it invalid. So here's the deal. It could still be invalidated if he takes it any further. Ty Cobb, the White House counsel, said they're not worried that they got rid of, he didn't say this, but they got rid of Flynn and Manafort the second that they were told about these stings. Entrapment, illegal entrapment of a presidential candidate and a president-elect and a president, because remember, this continued with Comey even afterwards, with lies, with supposed obstruction of justice. When he told Comey, "Are you going to let this go?" It was more like saying to Comey, to his pet dog, petting him on the head, "Are you going to get over the fact that I took the bone away from you?" He didn't tell him to stop the investigation. There was no investigation. There never was a serious investigation of any counterintelligence of Flynn and Russian meddling. That is a lie. These are minor investigations for not filing as foreign agents. And with Manafort, they're going to try to get him on that and a tax evasion. These are silly things. What really happened, Betsy? Here's what really happened, as you pointed out. We got to see Mueller for who he is, a wolf in sheep's clothing.
He was just protecting his own.
We got to see that Comey is still continuing his counterintelligence. We got to see that there will be no justice if Comey or Mueller or any of those 17 lawyers that Mueller brought from WilmerHale, which should have been the first sign to all of us, conflict of interest. Manafort is represented by WilmerHale. They can't prosecute him. That is how Manafort will get out. And if Manafort doesn't know this, hey, Polly boy, you didn't have to do any of that. Conflict of interest. You should have never cooperated. You should have gone with conflict of interest and said that they had no grounds or no jurisdiction for you.
Okay, wrap it up, darling.
Okay, so what will really happen? Trump effect will win. As Ty Cobb has said, there's nothing here, folks. Keep moving on. Well, that's what Mueller is here to do for the deep state, for Hillary, for Bill, for all of them, for the corrupt ones. Nothing here. Keep moving on. What has Trump said from the beginning? Nothing here. Biggest witch hunt in history. Nothing will happen out of this. They intended this investigation to go for 4 years. They wanted to take it to the 2020. I predicted that.
But they can't, because if they take it any further, they're going to have to look into Uranium One.
And
Mueller's involved.
I told Bob Muellerface that if he didn't end it quick, this would happen.
Yeah, well, now
I can't believe I actually stuck my neck out and helped the deep state by saying that. But that is the truth. He is getting in hot water every single second. If he doesn't wrap this up soon, but what did he do? By insinuation, lies, which had to be retracted in the mainstream media, what did they really do? Continue to insinuate that Trump was connected to the Russians and that there was Russian meddling. They will never stop saying there was Russian meddling in the election because RT bought some ads on Facebook, and that's all they have.